Alright, a lot of Jhin players had been worried about Season 14 since Gale Force is no longer in the game, but despite this, Jhin is actually one of the strongest bot lane champions you can play right now. The reason is of course that lethality items are insanely strong in Season 14, so Jhin doesn't miss his old Gale Force whatsoever. Jhin's high damage has always been rather oppressive in the early and mid game, but with the new lethality mechanics change, it got even more ridiculous. In case you're not aware of this, lethality in Season 14 gives you significantly more armor penetration during the early game than before the rework. It is now literally the same as flat pen, and since base armor is quite low on low levels, this is a highly impactful change. Yes, Jhin has his problems, but his strengths more than make up for his shortcomings right now, as he's one of the best lethality users in the bot lane. And I don't mean to say Jhin would be bad in high elo or anything, but especially in low elo where lots of mistakes happen, Jhin is a true 1v9 solo carry champion. He has the perfect mix of damage and utility for a marksman, which means his punish game is top notch, and you can get a lot of mileage from each of the opponent's blunders. Jhin is a solid pick if you want to climb, and I will now give you all the infos on his runes, builds and playstyle so you can play him to his full potential right away. But if you are serious about reaching high elo, it is not just important to unlock a champion's full potential, but also your own potential as a player. I'm currently partnered with the League of Legends coaching company Solo Queue Solution, and I chose them because I think that their coaching program is by far the best you can get. And they have challenger coaches for all 5 roles, not just for you ADC mains out there. Of course, working one-on-one with a challenger coach by your side is a premium service and only makes sense for truly dedicated solo queue players, but this challenger coach will turn you into a diamond player guaranteed, so it is well worth it. If you love the competitive nature of League of Legends solo queue, if you love to excel at your hobbies, if you want Season 14 to be your season, you can find all the information in the description and book your first coaching session right away. With that being said, Jhin's recommended rune page in Season 14 is Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Treasure Hunter with Celerity and Gathering Storm secondary. There are still people, even in high elo, who play Fleet Footwork, and this is completely fine and also has its merits, but Dark Harvest is recommended because with this snowballing keystone you will get the most mileage out of your lethality. Early and mid game is where you have the highest pressure, and bot lane is very chaotic right now due to the Season 14 jungle changes, so you will have a lot of opportunities to collect Dark Harvest stacks so you can snowball as hard as possible. Taste of Blood also adds to your early game pressure. The other 2 runes don't really give Jhin much, and Taste of Blood, besides Doran's Blade, Taste of Blood is your only source of health regeneration, which is one of the key weaknesses of the build. But again, the strengths more than make up for it, and in the very late game you will be able to compensate, as you will see. Now in the next row, Eyeball Collection is a no-brainer. You only really take Zombie Ward maybe on champions that buy Umbra Glaive. Jhin could buy Umbra Glaive, but with this build, or in the current state of the meta, I wouldn't recommend, so Eyeball Collection is the way to go. Treasure Hunter, also another snowballing rune. Jhin loves his items, especially with lethality. The earlier you get your lethality items, the better, so Treasure Rune is a no-brainer. The other runes, you always have to look at the alternatives in that very row. The other runes don't really give Jhin as much as getting his items faster. And speaking of fast, Jhin also very much loves his movement speed, so you want Celerity always on, even on Fleet Footwork rune pages, you still take Celerity, Gathering Storm secondary, and Jhin always needs to reposition between his auto attacks. Boots also a priority purchase on him, and Celerity just helps with that. Also your passive gives you movement speed, which does scale Celerity further. In addition, you take Gathering Storm because all the other runes you could get are kinda meh, and Gathering Storm is a lot of AD. In the late game, it's kind of a late game insurance, and in the late game you also have a lot of crit, so the more AD you have, the better. Yes, Jhin naturally has high AD, but it's a scaling stat, especially with crit. It scales extremely well, and again, you have to look at the alternatives, and they don't really make sense. Now for the item build, I'll give you a full example build first and then I'll break it down. So you could essentially in most games go Yomu's Ghostblade first, then Boots of Swiftness, then Collector, then Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, and Lord Dom's or Mortar Reminder. So the first 3 items, well, 4 if you count Doran's Blade, which you will sell in the late game of course, but the first 3 items, Yomu's Ghostblade, Swifties, and Collector, are pretty much set in stone. Yes, there are plenty of lethality items to choose from, but Yomu's Ghostblade is the best on Jhin. Keep in mind, Ghostblade itself got massively buffed this season, getting 400 gold cheaper, losing the ability haste, which is whatever, also losing the mythic passive of course, and losing the conditional lethality passive, but it keeps the 60 AD and the 18 lethality, and most importantly the movement speed. The stat profile is just amazing, especially after the lethality rework, and the movement speed, again, Jhin has a lot of time between his fixed auto attacks, and he needs to use that time to reposition, which means movement speed is exceptionally valuable on this champion. You should always go Youmuu's first for this reason, and it's not even close. Nabutsu Swiftness, arguably you finish them most of the time before you even finish Ghostblade. Again, movement speed is valuable on Jhin, and you want that as fast as possible. And afterwards you get Collector. Collector adds even more lethality, of course, but also transitions your build into crit for the late game, and you need to keep your damage high in the late game too, or else you will fall off too hard if you just go full lethality everything. Now the last 3 items are pretty much also fixed, but their order is flexible. Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, and a Last Whisper item are all very important. Rapid Fire Cannon for the movement speed and for the range, setting up your W more easily. Infinity Edge because of the inherent synergies with Jhin's crits. And Lord Dom's or Mortal Reminder, a Last Whisper item, is definitely necessary to cut through tanks or even through high-level squishy champions in the late game. Now this order of Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, and then the Last Whisper item will serve you well in most matchups, but against very tanky champions you might need the Last Whisper item right after Collector, and you have to kind of mix and match and decide when you need which item exactly. But as you can see, 0% lifesteal, so in the late game you need to stay very safe. You need to use Rapid Fire Cannon range, your W range, your ult range, and only walk up when the enemy are under crowd control. But in the very late game you could also sell an item for Bloodthirster, probably selling Youmuu's Ghostblade at this point to get to 100% crit, and then have Bloodthirster for the lifesteal. In any case, let's now have a close look at how Jhin is played in Season 14 in a real in-game example. Jhin is definitely one of bot lane's lane bullies. Enemies will have a hard time trading against him because his auto attacks deal so much damage early on, which also makes him quite easy to play because last hitting minions is very straightforward. Your autos deal a lot of damage, which gives you a long window, and also comes with good wave clear. He really has everything a strong lane bully needs, which should create a lot of openings for your ally. Of course, Jhin's natural trading pattern revolves around his 4th shot, but especially once you climb to higher elo, enemies will respect that. In low elo you can punish enemies left and right, just get your 4th shot and hit them, but they can see you're on your 4th shot, so that won't always work. Anyway, for the most part you want to wait for your support to create openings, in this case with a hook, and you want to avoid getting hooked by the enemy support. However, that doesn't always work out, of course. Sometimes you get the better support, game's easy, sometimes the enemy gets the better support, or your support just gets unlucky in this game, which makes for quite the difficult game here in this one, for example. Blitzcrank is positioning very deliberately and carefully, whereas Pyke is a little over-aggressive. And as you can see, he stands between his minions technically, which means Blitzcrank does manage to finally land that engage, which means Jhin is ultimately out of luck. Pyke will go down here, and Jhin, I mean, of course it's easy if you can pressure the enemy and you can get the hooks and the W follow-ups and the damage, but if the enemy gets all of that, then Jhin cannot make use of his early game too much. But as long as you stay on the map, you can at least farm from range with your W, stay safe, and play for the mid game or for the later phases of lane phase, which is where Jhin truly shines once he gets his lethality. But should the enemy be foolish enough to look for an engage and not really get the full engage on you, Jhin can deal a lot of damage with 4th shot and with W. It's so easy to set up plays. Even a tanky champion like Blitzcrank or enemy Leona support will take a lot of damage from your full rotation. Jhin is really potent during the early and mid game. And even if you're playing with a support who's having a bad day, Jhin openings are just too easy for them. 1 W leads to a free engage, and the support can really follow up with ease, essentially. Hook is completely free when the enemy can't move, or your team can follow up in that case. I mean, Jhin, in general, he just loves the chaos in the new Season 14. As you can see, the new gank paths make it very easy, make it very attractive for your allies to start stuff in the bot lane, also for the enemy, and Jhin just thrives in the chaos, as you will see. The more plays that are being made in the bot lane, the happier Jhin will be, not only because lethality is at its strongest right now, but also because you can collect Dark Harvest stacks left and right. Jin's punish game in these messy situations with his execute damage is really valuable. A lot of good things will happen for your teammates when they play around Jhin, especially when you throw your Ws very deliberately. And again, as soon as you hit that 2 lethality items power spike, this is where the enemy needs to be most wary of you. Of course, it would be nice to just execute them when your team catches them, but even if your teammates are the ones getting caught, the enemy can't just run past you. The enemy have to respect your damage, and you can bail your teammates out just by the sheer presence of your damage potential. But of course, the best way to take full advantage of your broken lethality items is when it's not your team getting caught, but you actually have a proper team fight, and you can make use of your auto attacks and your execute damage. Yes, a big selling point of Jhin as a champion is the massive range on W and ultimate, but if the enemy are getting locked down by your front line, they're crowd controlled, they can't hit you, it's completely safe to walk up and use your auto attacks. They hold so much value, you want to get to that 4th shot as fast as possible, so use your auto attacks so you can ultimately execute whoever is facing you. Yet, especially with lethality, your ultimate still holds a lot of value, so when a fight starts way outside your auto attack range, it's of course completely okay to press W, press ultimate, get all that damage in, and then walk towards them. If you get disturbed by an enemy, or if the enemy are just getting low or getting out of your ult range, you can start walking up and make quick work of what's left of them, all while maintaining a safe positioning. Yet the best part is that despite the fact you're playing an early game focused lethality champion, Jhin still has a good late game because you are transitioning into a full crit build after all. Now, if you want to see a full gameplay video of this Jhin style with educational live commentary, click the link on your screen right there.